Okay, today is October 22nd, 2010. My name is Mary Larson. We are here with Mr. Armen Melikian doing a recording for the O State Stories Oral History Project for the 50-year class reunion for folks from the year of graduated in 1960. Welcome back to OSU for your reunion.
Delighted to be back.
Were there some special reasons why you decided to participate in this class reunion this year?
Yes, there was, and there was being a 50 years ago, 50th anniversary. It's always, a lot of memories and a lot of time gone by, and it's just a half a century, and it's a lot of things involved in 50th things. So I had the opportunity and had the time, and we were going to come to Oklahoma, and this just fit the schedule very well. So glad to be here.
Well, wonderful.
Just delighted to be here.
Well, what are some of the things you're looking forward to seeing or doing while you're back for the reunion?
I having all the memories of the university, I like to take a part in going around and seeing some of the buildings I was in. I did a lot of working, which we'll talk about it maybe later, and renew my thoughts and my memories of being here. Of course, place is growing, and I'm interested in see the growth, and this is a fantastic university, and I'm very proud of it. So I want to see all I can see while I'm here.
Okay. Let's just start out. If you could tell me a little bit about your early life and what growing up was like for you.
Growing up for me, it was like sheer poverty, as you might have heard some of the stuff going on in the part of the world I was born and raised, like Afghanistan, Iraq. I was born in Iran, very poor country at that time. I grew in a small village of mostly Armenian folks, and we were sharecrop farmers, plenty struggling to make a living, and grew up and finished 4th grade education in that little village, and that was all I could get. Mm-hmm. And then my brother had run away to the big city of Tehran, and lucky for me, he asked my mom and dad that I should go to Tehran and stay with him and go beyond 4th grade education. My family, nobody had more than 4th grade, so it was an opportunity for me, and of course I was lucky enough. So I went and stayed with him, and my mom and dad were behind, and I was just me and him. And I finished the elementary school, then I finished junior high, and then I finished high school. And once I finished that, worked all the time I was schooling. So then I had this dream of going beyond, and I wanted to go into an engineering, doing something. Scraped up, managed to save enough money to have money to get travel to the United States, mm-hmm. and I had good enough grades to get a student visa, so I traveled to the United States. And there were some people back home that were a little helpful as to which colleges, which universities offer what kind of a degree. For whatever reason, I was infatuated with airplanes. The Shah of Iran used to fly a little airplane, and I thought, wow, if somebody can make that, I should be able to make it. So coming from the middle of nowhere, knowing nothing about that, that was my dream, to be an engineer to make airplanes and whatever. So I chose Oklahoma State. They had aerospace, aeronautical engineering curriculum. So I chose Oklahoma State to come here, and I traveled on land, boats, cabs, taxis, trains, whatever I could get, the cheapest way to get here. So I made it to Oklahoma State.
Did you come in New York?
I came on boat from France to New York and then on a bus to Stillwater.
So did you know anybody in Oklahoma at the time?
I didn't know anybody in this country, and I knew very little English, so I was the loner and nobody to turn to help me. Or people back home didn't have enough money to send, or very little help from them. But I was destined to come here and do something. Here I am.
Well, that must have been a tough adjustment when starting college, not knowing anyone.
I didn't never have time to think about the difficulties of it.
Mm-hmm.
I just had my mind made up what I was going to do. I jumped over a lot of obstacles, and thank God I made it.
So your major was probably aerospace engineering?
Aerospace engineering, a mechanical aerospace option.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there some classes from that major that you, or any other major for that part, any of your other classes that you particularly remember?
I remember every class.
Mm-hmm.
First semester I took English and trying to get my English improved so I could follow what's going on, what the professor was lecturing about. Mm-hmm. And mostly technical mathematics and engineering thing, and then followed on with all the engineering courses. I had some optional thing to do. I had to take history and political science, which was most difficult class for me. The engineering was easy, the rest of them was difficult. So yes, I enjoyed all the engineering courses.
Were there any courses that were a surprise to you, that you found something that you really liked that you didn't know you were interested in previously, or were you so focused on engineering?
I was infatuated with the science portion of it, technical portion of the stuff, and learning things about what I want to be. How do you make an airplane? What makes it fly, and all that stuff. Sure, it was very, very infatuating and interesting. So I followed through.
Were there any faculty members, any professors you had that were particularly influential?
Yes, there were many faculty members. In fact, they were one of them. In the mathematics class, Dr. Smith, we used to call him Square Root Smith, and we said he only passes the square root of number of students in a class. His nickname was Square Root Smith. And in mechanical engineering class, I had several professors. Aerospace school, Professor Fila. It was a nice man, and just wonderful, and I got to know the family and all that. And then in the graduate school, Dr. Zumwalt, Glenn Zumwalt, was just a fantastic, smart, and very friendly guy, and he was my advisor. So I remember all of that. There were many others, but just to name a few.
Now, when you came over, did you have a scholarship, or did you work on campus while you were here?
I did not have a scholarship. I was an out-of-state student, and I had to pay the out-of-state tuition, and I was getting little money from my brother, about a fourth of what I needed, and I worked at least 40 hours a week and took 22 hours credit per semester and pounded through.
So what did you have a number of different jobs on campus?
I didn't. The third day when I arrived, the third day after I arrived, I got a job sweeping chemistry building. And they all hired me to do janitorial work, and then I started sweeping the engineering building. And after that, after sweeping, I would come to your student union and wash dishes till midnight. And then after midnight, I go home and do my homework and get 4 hours of sleep and begin the next day. Yeah, I have a lot of.
It's a very different experience than many students had.
Absolutely, I say I enjoyed all of that. It was difficult, but it was a journey, and I had fun every step of the way.
What buildings were most of your classes in at that point?
Classroom building and engineering building. And of course I took the chemistry work, physics, and all that stuff, but most of them were in engineering building.
Okay. What do you remember? I mean, is there anything in particular you remember about those buildings? Did they have a special smell, or or just do you have any particular memories about those? Were they always crowded? Were they always noisy? Were they always quiet?
I don't have any specific thoughts about if a building had some characteristics I did not pay attention. Maybe didn't bother me or didn't overwhelm me.
Right. Nothing that made a big impression.
Not made a big impression. I know when I was working, I would have a class and then I'd go work the third floor or fourth floor, and that was my floor to sweep and clean and get ready for next day. And so that was just a journey.
Now, where did you live when you were in school?
When I first arrived at Oklahoma State, they took me to Cordell Hall. Is the Cordell Hall still there?
Hmm?
Oh, great. I'm going to go drive. Are we going to go and drive by or visit by or what?
I'm not sure what's on the tour, but
But
you could ask.
I'm going to go see Cordell Hall because that was my first home. When I arrived here, some nice young lady took me to Cordell Hall, and I had my suitcase and whatever because she came and met me at the bus station, and then brought me to the registrar's office. And then after registration, she helped me to go to, she helped me to find Cordell Hall, so she took me over there. And then Mr. Thomas was the what do you call it, Mr. Thomas and his wife, they were...
Oh, the dorm parents?
Dorm parents, right. And Mr. Thomas came and greeted me, and then he said, well, there was one other student from my country, and he said, you want a room with American student or somebody from your country, or etc. I said, I don't want to see anybody else except American student. So he put me with an American student, which I wanted to be because I needed to learn English. I didn't want to speak Armenian or some other language. I just enjoyed that. That was good. So I stayed in the dormitory for a couple of years, and then we moved out. My roommate and I moved out and lived in town someplace.
Okay. When you lived in the residence hall, how were the rooms assigned? Just randomly, or?
I guess I asked to room with an American student. Whichever room was a bed available, and they put me in.
Yeah. Now, you said that they had sent someone to meet you at the
bus station.
So it was through the registrar's office? Or?
I assume so. They knew I was coming, and I'm not sure I remember all precisely whether I called when I got in or somehow we had communicated that she met me over there.
Now, when do you still have contact with any of the friends you made in the dorm in your residence hall, or?
Not for a long time. It was too far gone, so lost continuity.
Well, what about when you lived off campus? Where did you live when you moved off campus?
I don't remember. My roommate and I moved not too far away from campus, and we rented 2 little rooms, about 4 by 4.
In somebody's house?
In somebody's house, and we weren't cooking. We used to eat out, but we felt like that was the thing we wanted to do. That's where I stayed, and then I got married, and of course we had our own place, someplace.
So did you get married while you were in school
yes,
here?
Yes.
Ah, how did you meet your wife?
I met her when I was working at the chemistry department. And we met and ended up being together, and we had our first child here. Our oldest daughter was born here. Did
you live in married student housing, or did you just get a place off
First
campus?
we lived in a little apartment that we could afford. And then we had an opportunity that we moved in a student housing, someplace called 2A MIDI. Whatever that is, I'm going to try to find it. So.
Did you have, either with your other roommate or once you were married, did you have a favorite place to eat out or a student hangout that you used to go
Our
to?
student union was it, and since I worked a lot of hours, I didn't have much time to hang around town or go to bars or do some parties. We had some, but mostly was work and study and get some sleep.
Yeah, that's why I asked about food first, because I figured, well, you had to eat at some point.
Yeah, there was places called, they called it smorgasbord or something like that. And we used to go have lunch and dinner, something like that.
Well, were you involved? I realized there probably wasn't much time for this with the schedule that you had, but were you involved in any campus activities or organizations?
I joined some of the technical organization, ASME, and we had some meetings, and I also joined, what did we call that? American Institute of Aeronautics. So anyway, aeronautical institution that I joined, and we had some meetings, and I was a member of that technical group or technical organization.
And did you have monthly meetings or?
Occasional meeting, I don't remember, it was monthly or whatever, but we had meetings, and they would talk about things that was happening. Aerospace was coming to be, so it was an interesting.
Right, because that would have been cutting edge at that point.
It was good.
I bet there was a lot of excitement in that department. I mean, or in those departments at the time.
There was, and we were beginning a lot of things, and when I was in graduate school especially, I remember a lot of things in that. Actually, Dr. Zuma was being my technical advisor, and for my thesis I designed our first supersonic wind tunnel.
Wow.
In Oklahoma State. I don't know where it is now, and I'd like to go see it. I have a copy of my thesis that I designed this. There's a lot of design thing for the.
If you want to hold that up for the camera here, we can.
Well, maybe let me show another picture that looks like wind tunnel.
Okay.
Where are you, wind tunnel?
You can never find a wind tunnel when you need one.
Well, it's there. There's a nice picture of that supersonic wind tunnel. Oh, here it is.
Where did you build that? I mean, where did you?
We built it in our OSU machine shop.
Okay.
Yeah, there is the flow chamber of the supersonic wind tunnel that I designed, and we ended up building, and they used it for years for testing their supersonic stuff, and a whole bunch of calculation that I had to do to make the design work, and that kind of stuff. So anyway, it was a beautiful journey to design that, and
That was.
it's a historic thing, you know. It was there for some time. I'm sure they have much more sophisticated one now.
Well, and that was for your bachelor's.
No, that was a master's.
Your master's, okay. But still, that's
So I have some vested interest.
quite a project, yes. And so you did your graduate work here
Right,
too.
right. I did master's degree for it.
Okay. Now, what were some of the student traditions and activities that you remember from when you were at OSU?
Well, it was the usual. We had the basketball team. Our basketball team then, it was the top of the heap, and we used to go to the game, and at that time Hank Ibar was the coach, and boy was some jewel. We were good at basketball team, and I liked that. Football, of course, we had football, and there was always that big fight between us and Oklahoma University, which still is. And sometimes we won, and most of the times we didn't, but it was exciting. So those two things were, when I had time, I would go and enjoy it.
Did you remember something called emphasis weeks? There might be an ag week, an engineering week.
Yeah, there was that.
Were your groups involved? Were the engineering groups involved?
I wasn't as in a group as such involved, but I knew it was there, and we try to be helpful, etc.
Well, let's see. If you got married while you were on campus, do you remember the tradition of throwing people into Theta Pond when they got engaged?
I remember Theta Pond. I didn't get thrown in there, but I knew it was the highlight of a lot of things. You know, the sorority people and the fraternity people did that a lot, but the ones in the dormitory, it was just sort of, you know,
not so much.
Not the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
I drove by Theta Pond and said, "Wow, it was." It was historic.
Well, wait till you see it at night. They've got orange lights around it. So, what do you remember about homecoming when you were?
Homecoming was, of course, the number of students were not as big, and college wasn't as big, but homecoming was a parades and all the hoorah stuff and rah thing, getting ready for football game was a big thing. Mm-hmm. Still is, I guess.
And I guess do you remember the first Pistol Pete mascot? That would have happened.
I remember first Pistol Pete mascot. In fact, I think it came to be while I was here. Good old Pistol Pete. Yeah. I knew the guy that was Pistol Pete too.
Which one?
I forgot his name. It was a nice young guy that had the costume and was the Pistol Pete at the games. And
we wanted to make sure that we talk to you a little bit about your career after you graduated, and we can follow up later with this too, but just to close up your time at OSU, are there any favorite memories you have of your time on campus here?
There are a lot of favorite memories. I guess the best thing was having a big part in creating a supersonic wind tunnel, which was my thing. Mm-hmm. And I was incredibly interested in aerospace and high-speed aircrafts and supersonic airplanes, and having an opportunity to do something for my thesis, yet something useful for future generation to use. It was a momentous thing. So when I finished, and my master's oral exam was highlight thing, and I enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of relief when you're done with that.
A lot of relief, and I made it. And mm-hmm. Was I wanted to go beyond that point, but finances didn't allow that at that time.
Well, what did you do after? Could you talk a little bit about what you did after you graduated? And, because you've been very involved in the aerospace industry.
I had a grand, glorious career in aerospace. First thing I did is I couldn't get into aeronautical aerospace work because I did not have my citizenship at that time. They weren't willing to work to get security clearance for me to work on military stuff and big airplanes and high-speed jets and etc. So I went to work for Mountain Bell Laboratories and Western Electric in Oklahoma City. And then when I got my citizenship, then I immediately moved to aerospace. Of course, my first job was still historic. I worked on Apollo spacecraft. I designed a bunch of things for Apollo spacecraft to put man on the moon, and so I have a lot of good memories and pride in that. So after Apollo spacecraft, I worked on a few other aircraft stuff, and then I moved into Boulder, Colorado, and worked for Ball Aerospace, where we got into aerospace big time, and I designed had a lot to do with designing a lot of spacecrafts, military and commercial, and space station. I worked on a space station, had quite a bit to do with that, the shuttle program. And at the final, before I retired, 5 years or so before I retired, I had an opportunity to work with Russian space agency. So I used to go to Moscow and do quite a bit of work there. So
Because that's one of your 8 languages, isn't it?
I learned Russian as a result, yes. So anyway, I had an interesting career in aerospace. From putting the man on the moon to space station, flying right now, to a lot of scientific satellites and a bunch of other things that I can't talk about it because of classified nature of it. I have a lot of good memories and no regrets.
How do you think Oklahoma State prepared you for that career?
It was my foundation. I learned my science and engineering here, and wherever I went, I did my assignment first class and top-notch work, and without, this was my learning place. So, coincidence and whatever happened, I was here, and I learned here, and I took it out there, and I used it, and it's been a fantastic journey.
If you had the opportunity to give advice to OSU students today, what would you tell them?
Don't lose the sight of your goal. Pursue it to the end, and you'll be delighted to get there.
And is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about a little more, or any memories that we didn't touch on that you'd like to share?
Well, how much time you got?
Well, at this point, not a whole lot, but we can do a follow-up interview.
That's fine. I have had, it's been 50 years, and I've had exposure. I was fortunate to have exposure to wild and woolly space, and there are certain things I did that you and all the rest of humanity uses, and I had just a little bit of a contribution to that. GPS satellites, that is revolutionized the world view, and etc. I had something to do with that. Your cell phones and etc. and the technical advancement that we generated from Apollo time till now, everybody is benefiting from it. So there's lots of things to talk about.
There are so many things that came out of the space programs.
Oh yeah, and it still comes out of it. For example, Hubble telescope. I had a lot to do in making the Hubble work, and that Hubble is absolutely revolutionized the knowledge of our universe, and it still is, continues taking things. So there's a lot to talk about.
What would you say is your proudest accomplishment?
I reached my goal. I reached my goal, and I made a big impact in scientific advancement of mankind.
Well, we thank you so much for coming back here and talking to us. We really appreciate it. And we hope to talk to you again further at some point.
I would be delighted to
Well, thank you.
discuss some more, and thank you very much for giving me this time and opportunity to cover some of this subject.